Good day, folks. Welcome to Macro Overview Summer 2021. As I explained in the welcome video, it's important for us to understand what are the trends happening in society today, where does our current economic situation, what is the impact of policies? Because a company operates within this broad economic environment, whether that's finance or in organizational behavior, they operate in this environment. So decisions that are made, how we approach work, is based on this macro overview. So, and this is the world that you are going to be entering in from a work perspective. So it's important for you to be able to be successful in your future, that you know what's going on so you can see where the opportunities are for you to grow and develop. I want to go back to basic econ, and that's the basic assumption, that price is determined by an agreement between a willing buyer and a willing seller. Price is influenced by the relationship between supply and demand. If supply exceeds demand, prices go down. If demand exceeds supply, prices go up. Product, services, and labor. And it's important that we look at the demand side versus supply side being manipulated or otherwise controlled. So that's a basic assumption. Keep that in mind as we're going. The other thing is the economy is what is happening. Mostly database, many measures of what the economy is doing. Is it growing? Is it staying stagnant? Or is it falling? And it's a measurement of society to a degree. And then there are the financial markets, stocks, bonds, etc. And they often reflect what has happened, but what may happen in the future. Different people make different assumptions about what is going to happen. Thus, you have a difference of opinion. And the financial markets often react based on news. The inflation data that we got last week that we'll talk about got everybody nervous, and it had a market impact. Does it have a long-term impact? That'll be seen, but that was a reaction to news. The market is influenced by program algorithmic traders. So sometimes it may not reflect what's happening, what happened yesterday in the economy today, or what may happen. It is purely a mathematical thing. So keep them two aside. What we're going to look at today is a pandemic, the pandemic of 2020, a discussion on behavioral health. We're going to look at mega long-term global trends, the future of 2021 and beyond. We're going to take a look at economic measurements and forecasts. Then we'll wrap that up with policy impacts. Section 5 will be a brief discussion. How did this impact you personally and the work we will do in this class? So let's start with the pandemic of 2020, which each and every one of you have had personal experience with. Where we are today, right here, this is in May 18th. This we can see as we're running here, this is the daily cases. And as you can tell, we've on a downslip. We're almost back to where we were when it started. And when we saw this climb here, right through January, we've seen it decline. We've also seen a corresponding deaths in the U.S. But keep in mind, there's still almost 600,000 people have been reported dead since February 29th due to COVID. Almost 33 million people have gotten it. So it looks like we're over the hump, and we're coming down on both of these key measurements, which is good. So far, 157.8 million people have received one or more both doses, but there's only about a third of the country is fully vaccinated, and 47.5% received at least one dose. But look what's happening on the vaccine. This back here, everybody wanted it, demand was high, and now it's declining. So the number of people that are receiving the vaccine is dropping off, and it's dropping off pretty steeply. So the question, if we look here, there's 280 million eligible and 124 who have. So there's still a significant portion of the population that does not have it. So with all of that, is the COVID scare over? Is the pandemic over and we're going back to normal? I don't know. I don't think so. I think there's still a lot of unknown, and we're going to learn as we go. But one of the things that I think is important to look at, and this comes from a study by McKinsey and Company, which looks at, this was a question asked, after the COVID recovery, how are you going to approach things? And the one thing I want to focus on is remote work. Only 13% are going to go back to the pre-crisis way of remote work. 16 are going to keep it the way it is completely. 30% primarily current, and 40 will use mix. So these are massive changes that are happening. But the same thing is happening with business travel, how we use office space, how company interacts with customers, how do we build capacity and skills, how do we manage ESG issues, supply chain management. So there's going to be a lot of change that's already underway. Now I think COVID just pushed things along faster. So now let's just take a look at before COVID. And 2020 started out as an interesting year. Things were reasonably good. We were seeing slowing world economic growth, including here in the USA. A lot of trade tensions between countries. The stock market was in an upward trend. Unemployment was very low. Inflation was low. Interest rates were low. Airlines were adding new routes, new seats, adding new planes. But at the same time, we had political instability in many places. Then in January, we started hearing about some virus in Wuhan, China. Well, that was before. And we've been going through this for 9 months. I want to introduce something. Now, if you've taken this class with me before, or taken a class in the summer or the fall, this is repetitive, but hey, it's always a good reminder. And that's the black swan theory. And since Roman times, all swans are white was a fundamental truth. And in 1726, in an expedition to Australia, they captured 2 black swans, proving their existence and disproving the theory. Black swans are rare events, and they have an extreme impact. They can only be predicted retrospectively, and not prospectively. You can't anticipate that. So a black swan event is a highly improbable event with 3 characteristics. It's unpredictable. None of us could predict what was happen. It carries a massive impact. And after the fact, we make up explanations that it makes it appear less random and more predictable than it was. So the greater the the lesser the probability of it happening, the more catastrophic it can be. Now, so I would say COVID-19 is a black swan event. Okay, we have this here, and when this happens as COVID, it's going to work its way down the chain. There's a lot of impact. Health, physical and behavioral, economic impact, short-term and long, business, how business operates, what it does, our daily lives. Think about it from your perspective. How do we work? How do we go to school? How do we rest? How do we eat? How do we socialize? How do we exercise? Let's take a look at the impact of COVID-19 on our physical and emotional behavioral health. Let's define trauma. Trauma results from an event, series of events, or circumstances that is experienced by an individual, and now as a group, we're all impacted together. That's physically or emotionally harmful or threatening and thus has lasting adverse effects on our functioning, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Okay? And the impact, this trauma that we've experienced, is staying with us. It will impact us and how we behave in the future. Now, how do we deal with trauma? And both physically, emotionally, behavioral, and cognitive. And what I did is, and this is, I've moved through a lot of these things, but did you have some decreased concentration? Disrupted sleep? Did you lose interest in things? Did you sometimes feel overwhelmed? How did you feel at the end of this fall semester? Eating more or less than normal? Drinking or smoking more than normal? But the other ones here too. So that's how we deal. So this has been a normal thing. Your responses are normal reactions to abnormal events. Your responses are normal reactions to abnormal events. Now, I would like to just talk to you a moment. We go through stages, and I think that's important to see that today. Is pre-crisis, everything was good, we got a little warning, then here's the impact, okay? And everybody worked together at first. How are we going to do this? Then we became disillusioned. We've lost interest, okay? And we're working through it now, and we're now going to move through this process and reimagine and reconstruct. If you look back over the last century, we saw some of the world's most successful businesses form during moments of crisis. And this comes from John Kennedy, and he noted that the Chinese used two brushstrokes to write the word crisis. One brushstroke stands for danger, the other for opportunity. In a crisis, beware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity. For some organizations, they're just focusing on survival, one thing. Others are starting to see what is the future. How will we position ourselves after this crisis is past and things go back to a new way? What will that normal look like? We don't know how long this is going to last. Is it a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? What does the other side look like? And this applies to you and I in our future. We might call it resilience, or flexibility and planning. How do we withstand that shock? How are we adapting to change? How are we pursuing our new goals? What's the risk? How do we protect the weak spots? We'll see that this is part of both finance and organizational behavior. When we look at some of these things, 73% of Americans have tried new shopping behaviors during the crisis. Will it continue? Why are we talking about this? Why is this important for you to understand this? So that finance operates in an existing world. Decisions are made. How resources are allocated. How we engage with each other as employees and employers. How do we come together? So understanding these things and what's happening and what the future may look like is important. And as I said, much of what is written in textbooks will be rendered obsolete by this Black Swan event. We'll see that in many cases as we're going. What I'd like to do now is, I could keep talking, but I think I'm going to show you two brief videos, and that really sums up some of the things that are going.
Like everyone else, COVID has changed my world, and it's changed my perspective.
In rather breathtaking speed, the pandemic has upended things, like you say, approaching our planning horizons. It seems almost to nothing.
What is it when we think the unthinkable? And in business terms, that could include that the actual market in which you're competing has just disappeared and it isn't going to come back.
Really want to be able to give my mom and dad a hug, and same with my in-laws. So, and I want my kids to see their grandparents. Like, it's just like a really bad situation.
It's starting to get a bit tiresome. Had to borrow some money over the last few months. No money for like emergencies.
We estimate that there are an additional 17 million people who are facing food insecurity right now. That's a 46% increase.
%50 of Americans reporting reduction in household spending. We saw U.S. retail sales drop to a record low.
Many people's incomes have collapsed, and the services they need, health services, education services, other services, have collapsed alongside them.
What really happened is we've vaulted about 5 years in terms of both consumer and business adoption of digital in probably just a matter of weeks.
Leveraging data and analytics, there are many things we can do now that we weren't able to before in terms of identifying who's at greatest risk and where we can make the biggest difference and how do we get to people earlier.
We've now done hundreds of implementations completely virtually, which I never thought would have been possible pre-COVID, and we figured it out.
Part of this is a part of a strategy to move towards a more contactless passenger journey, which parallels some of the things the airlines are doing as well.
When we asked women, 1 in 4 women said that they are contemplating stepping out or stepping back.
It's making sure that you allow anti-racism or racial equity or whatever your chosen favorite, woke term is actually embedded into your DNA as a company.
This is a crisis, but it's also an opportunity for organizations to live their purpose.
I have tremendous confidence that with the brain power and the investment that's happening, that we'll look back on this time and say, amazing how society responded to put this behind us.
My name is Scott Harrison.
Just listen.
This is my wife, my son, and my one on the way.